Chili here with Sirius Dallas Moon, and I'm in a fierce dilemma between my AC and my charger. I'm gonna pick my charger. This is all our. And yeah, bring in some wisdom from the 12th. Ascendant Sirius. Ooh, Ascendant Sirius conjoining Venus and Jupiter, slowly applying to Procyon. So I'm going to conjoin this Sedna veneration with Procyon. Now, continuing on, I briefly mentioned that, and let me put it that way. As I commented to Seizure Gove, when we see rape culture enabled, we understand that they're planting a false flag. Here it is. יש שתיים, שלוש אפילו. Ooh. Okay. Thank you. We understand that they're planting a false flag. When we see rape culture abolished, we understand that they want to prevent invasion. לא יודעת עכשיו, אצלי פה, לא כרגע. For example, 2 years before the Me Too, and right before Peace Now turned to V15, or One Voice Israel, One Voice Palestine turned to V15, the ex-head of the intelligence came to recruit people for the Israeli-Palestinian Chamber of Commerce for apprenticeship. I know because people. And it was not an intelligence position, so I did not need any security classification. And and I talked about the fact that I wasn't physically harassed or anything, but the culture that was not orgasmic labor supportive culture was affecting my life energy, and I basically did not even take the money that I was deserving of for the transportation. At any case, of course, I'm grateful for the opportunity and for um, being in that position for the little while that I was there. And the reason that I couldn't continue has to do with changes that need to be made for the business perception that codependency will have peace in the Middle East, a perception that not only Shimon Peres but also Bennett and Teshuvah are a part of. We have to have fifth vital sign and orgasmic birthing supportive practices as a part of business, meaning no transactional relations, which completely counters the intelligence perception of hot bodies or basically trafficking and torture. So, and that's not just one entity that operates in the region or in the world. Now, understanding that before a false flag, they and by the way, that was right before, I think it was 2 years before the Me Too. So actual genuine attempts to have some sort of something, but without abolishing rape, all the way through from the hidden or intelligence to the open military actions to the policies to the occultism. And I can say, even in a business, I worked for a while at the jade egg selling business, which was mentioning the bodily trauma from even self-pleasure being made in a way that's not completely honoring sexual boundaries. And the business model for the sales was not compatible with the content or the product. The product was excellent, the service, the courses were excellent, the business model, um, that was the sales model, was not compatible. Again, it came from different sectors. That was a new enterprise, a new type of industry that negates sex trafficking. Um, and because it contributed to the health of the fifth vital sign by chance, it was not a medical course, basically created a beginning of the antidote to the Epsteinis. This is why I talk about um, taking inspiration from preparation to orgasmic birthing as life transitions, connecting the astrology. And again, a contribution is always going to be the tiny speck in the ocean of what brought us to think about that, yet that tiny speck is quite important. And um, this is why I'm being so discerning about, no, it's not transmutation of pain to power, but actually orgasmic birthing. Why? Because that can be mistaken with misplaced arousal and can still occur within cult settings. That would, and this is why another telltale: do people justify genitalia mutilation, whether it's circumcision, to males, to women, to females, doesn't matter, juxtaposed to their teaching of orgasmic birthing? If they do, it's not countering, is basically not going to be supportive of national international security from the bigger picture. It is what it is. Embodiment is embodiment. Um, of course, the rabbinical would say that this is a pagan. I know that through circles of people that heard me say that, and they told me the rabbinicals agree, but they are afraid that the people will not would not believe that they have connection with the God, and so on. And then again, I saw with my lineage, the fear of assimilation is completely upside down to what the reality is. The, if I find the Christians, Lutherans, and Catholic Zudler, mind you, Zudler, with the with the Yiddish. Okay, one of them was creating the Moulin Rouge, which is a sort of, I don't know, they're probably a member of the Zionists that looted the Nazis to do, and the other one was hunting Nazi war criminals. Now here's the thing: both of them could be completely unaware of how one's life mission was affecting the other. But to the outside, it can look like, oh, the Jews planned that to begin with. Now, did they? Didn't they? I don't know. I don't know. I wrote Anita Zidler, which is the relative that said that they couldn't claim that the red and the blue couldn't claim the family, and and I said, well, what about abolishing rape from the scriptures as prevention of holocausts? Um, as an introduction for relatives meeting. So she thinks, yeah, I can see how that thing is from the family, or I look awkward, or both. Um, and yeah, were the Jews being cast away from Egypt another slavery abolition? I don't know, because the Jewish merchants had to appease the Phoenicians, um, perhaps on the account of what preserved the lineage. And because it pertains to my biological father lineage, then my strenuous daily dedication to realign and prevent further complications to my fascia and my thyroid with my biggie toe or hallux valgus, what is called, they testify bodily structure that some sort of costumes, namely weddings at puberty and all kinds of other costumes, um, may have been a risk to the lineage, so much so that the displacement was actually abolition of slavery. Yeah, tell it to the Egyptians that ask if I'm a Jew when I talk about abolishing rape from Genesis, which is supposed to be basis if we don't want to be persecuted for millennia. Now, why is rape culture contributing to invasion and false flag, whereas abolishing rape culture contributing to defense from invasion? Reason is very simple. Rape creates loss of sense of self and makes person more susceptible to mind control. Um, when a certain organization is okay with false flags, they enable rape culture. It always backfires in one way or another, but they still do it. When organization is abolishing of rape culture in praxis, then we see that they are actually intending to defend um, whether it's the land or the nation or even the organization itself, the real estate or the business. If they're planting false flag on the land, we're going to see enabling of rape culture. Prior to 7th of October, there was women would have problems to go on the bus with normal shirt uh, in the central Israel, which is supposed to be secular. And then there was 7th of October. Um, yeah, they try to take women drivers and so on, but the working conditions need to be compatible. If they took women drivers on the basis that only women would agree to such lousy working conditions, then it doesn't appease the defense structure. I said what I said. We literally saw it with 7th of October. There were a lot of work on corporations that were hiring women because women did not work more compromising regarding their working conditions. I know because I was the Goodell point to that, and people were in dismay because they thought hiring women means hiring a woman with all that used to entail, and then it didn't mean what it was supposed to mean. In retrospective, it would only upgrade their business, but they didn't have this mindset to begin with, and that made it difficult um, and created an unnecessary crisis. So, but essentially, they would have to adopt this, and the business would do better. Um, as long as it doesn't violate sense of self and so on and so forth. This is already beginning to be Procyon veneration. And it's very useful for mergers and acquisitions, diplomatic relations. Now here is what I don't recommend doing. How should I say that? I don't recommend. Let's give the example of Israel. They hired female bus drivers, but didn't change the working conditions And then the hiring of the women drivers was some sort of, instead of having labor rights that honor the feminine, that honor rest, and it's important for the safety of the passengers and the drivers. They were just hiring women because women tend to argue less about the working conditions. That is what I don't recommend doing. Um, and this is bringing me to the last point, which is the world will have to abolish rape culture in praxis in order to have any type of sovereignty, security, and so on. And this pertains to the people as well. If the people don't do that, it's basically legal to genocide them. I'm going to say it again, legal to genocide them. Because what is being genocided is criminals against humanity. You're saying, oh, surely do you justify the Israeli? No, what did I just told you? Israel prior to 2023 was, yes, hiring women drivers, but because they don't argue for their working conditions, which was still effectively dishonoring of the feminine. The Huguenots were massacred even though women had better conditions there than most other places, definitely better than Islam. It still was not suffice. They were still massacred because they did not denounce rape from the scriptures. It's not about relatively okay. And it's not about negotiating up and down the sense of self. The wealth that follows with the sense of self is the wealth that contributes to life. For example, um, that tiny open field with sugar canes and tomatoes in the middle of skyscrapers where a person can rest in the shade of a tree is not big real estate because it's in a certain location only. And those who rape on a land, it's easier to deprive them of land. For example, for Israel, it's very difficult to take over Gaza Strip because it hasn't abolished rape culture within. And if it hasn't abolished rape culture within, outside we had soldiers coming back, coach or post-trauma coach recovery, whatnot, that, oh, I also raped, am I like Hamas? That was the words of soldiers that came back from the war. Now, if you're like, well, good morning, just imagine the fact that it was not clear to them how much mind control and susceptibility to mind control they went in their training, which was probably rapey or Zumbur-like, to not be able to discern that. How far off the rails. And then when people talk about, modesty, don't rape, bless you, bless you. If the law does not defend people from being raped, then the law is an illegal law. Such jurisdiction system doesn't remain, and this is how we had Ottoman law replaced by British mandate law, replaced by the adoption of Judaic law that still had to appease many things, but then as the culture changes, and to try to change the culture back to sort of negotiate that doesn't work in Inquisition times. All the way to the Lutherans in Norway. Lutherans. The Sami people and the Inuit people have Sedna-like stories that show us that when there is human trafficking, even if the girl seems to be like picky and doesn't seem to want to marry anyone and so on, even if we traffic, that girl is still feminine. So this episode is both Sedna veneration but also Procyon veneration. And again, those that find that, how should I say that? When we talk about rebellion can only be towards something that has a sense of self. If it doesn't have a sense of self, you're not rebelling, you're just, how should I say that, fighting windmills. If you try to keep a person from having a sense of self, you're not even a rebel. Rebellion is only to establish sense of self. And definitely you're not an underdog, because if you violate somebody's sense of self, then you're not an underdog. They are the underdog. I say all Lutheran are like the Jesuits. Yeah, but that's what people have left with when they don't abolish rape. The Nazi war criminals and those who chased them have to share mansions and cabins in North Norwegian. And again, when people look at it from the point of view of virtue, they are still they're playing to a frame that no longer exists. And this is why they get frustrated, because it's like saying to an embodied person, "Oh, you are compliant with the church, you're compliant with the this, you're compliant with they're secular. So why are you against rape if you're a secular? Well, the church rapes as well." It's the sense of self, it's the I am. You're rebelling against somebody having a sense of self. And here is the Aquarian dilemma. Okay, the Aquarian tries to challenge the rules. Amazing, but it sextiles Aries, which is the sense of self. Rape negates the sense of self, so it shouldn't be a problem for the Aquarian archetypes to not participate in rapey structures. Like that is appeasing the Aquarian archetype. And this is also how the Aquarian run the risk of basically, how should I say that? Let their need for liberation not be their imprisonment. And the way to do that is sextiling the sense of self, which means if they don't rape, then they can actually effectively rebel. If they are taking their anger and frustrations on a person that simply exists, then they're not rebellious, they're just violent. And they could be seen as the narcissistic partner or the narcissistic. And then they can run into situations where they are actually the offender instead of the underdog. But the good thing is that Aries sextile, so the sense of self, the I am, is in a sextile with Aquarius, and so is Sagittarius. Both are supposed to emphasize for day charts the element of choice coming from Sagittarius and what is true that is still enshrined with the sense of self, and for night charts defending from rape, not raping and defending from rape, which preserves the sense of self. Um, and is also the remedial point with their opposition they have with Leo, which is the need to be seen, the need to shine, the need to be appreciated, but uniquely for who they are, but from an Aquarius, from an either an underdog position or as external to, let's say, not the usual celebrity type of position. And the sense of self here with Aries is the remediation, the zero rape, for example, the singer that doesn't go with rape culture in practice. Now, here is the thing about Aquarius. It is a community, it's more associated with the teenagers that are more affected by the group than their parents. And particularly if this group has an ideology or an activist lore around that. Because it's a community related sign. But if there's rape in that community, it will not appease Aries and it will definitely not appease Sagittarius. So if it's a day chart from Sagittarius, it would be, the Sagittarius would see, hey, what they're doing here is undermining itself. And from the Aries point of view, it would be, hey, I could not participate in a community that has rape culture. It negates my sense of self. And the right to exit violence from that community needs to be there. Okay, Aries rights, Mars sign. The trines are from Gemini, which is cities, civil society, and civil wars. Again, to appease Aldebaran, for it not to be a Pyrrhus win, the sense of self needs to be there, which means cannot be rapey. And for Libra, Libra harmony, balance, and beauty. I love the trine between the Aquarius and Libra because it is the ability to see symmetry in asymmetry, beauty in asymmetry. The uniqueness of symmetry is also an aesthetic criteria. And this is something that is very good for Libra, that tries to balance and harmonize everything and has a disdain from what is perceived to be the inaesthetic, also on a value basis. But Aquarius can point to a different point of view that has a different type of aesthetic that the Libra can connect to, and that can be very remedial. Yes, the inconjuncts are Virgo, which is the detail-oriented sign, and Cancer, which is reaching almost the same gnosis, but from an emotional point of view. The wisdom in emotions. If Aquarius is about being able to detach from the emotive, for example, Moon in Aquarius would be safe within the information that is emotionally supportive. Name it to tame it can literally be air moon. But a moon in Cancer, unless you have like particular Uranus in conjuncts or something like that, can be around feeling and radically accepting our emotions. The good balance of the inconjunct between Aquarius and Cancer is the radical acceptance, Aquarius, of our emotions, Cancer, which brings system regulation. Is bringing the element of air to the emotions, allowing the little bit of detachment, which is true radical acceptance, and a lot of emotion, allowing us to feel, basically. The good work of the inconjunct between Aquarius and Virgo. What is the one thing that changes everything? For example, you can be underdoggy, rebellious, and so on and so forth, but if you violate the sense of self of someone, you've already undermined yourself. Cancer and the moon can also be the issue of the mirror principle. Again, using the mirror principle as an element of power is not really effective if the practice is continuing to violate the sense of self of people. A person being is not a mirror to anyone in itself. It can be given the experience of being a mirror because their being can also be seen as reflecting, just like if I take a look at light, okay? Some of the light that comes to, let's say, our skin is absorbed and some of the light is reflected, and this is the color that people see. So that reflective part could be translated as a mirror, but that is in fact not a mirror. It's the sense of self, it's the existence. It's basically the colors of the person. But the perception of light is also not completely unified. Yeah, I think those are kind of the big issues that arise um, with this particular episode. Again, ascendant applying to Jupiter, Procyon, still soul hour, bringing in the information from the 12th, Sedna veneration and Procyon veneration.